I was muted. That was me. I said hello without the mic on. Sorry. And give folks a minute or two to join still. All right, it's 3 minutes past. I'm going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to need to be a little bit short today, probably about a half hour max, but should be able to get through things. So as normal, we've got the Google Doc, and it looks like everybody's dropped their name in there, so you see where we are on the agenda. There's only a couple of things I wanted to talk about in detail today, I think. We had a lot of discussion yesterday, so I'll briefly summarize that and then talk about the couple specific things in a little more detail. So the normal standing things, features, we haven't had any of the anticipated exceptions come through, and now we're getting into the phase where some planned things are starting to fall away. So one of them we discussed yesterday, Windows Container Stable GA status, that basically was aggressive, and then as they went out to the other SIGs to propose that they were ready, a number of other SIGs reviewed and found some things where they had some little bit more work to do, so that's moving forward to the 1.13 release. But there is still a lot of stuff that is landing in 1.12, so like from a communications perspective, release notes, documentation, I do think there's still work there. It's not like it's completely falling away, but it'll be important to make sure that we're not calling out as reaching the stable GA milestone specifically. Then around CI signal and test infrastructure, we still have a whole bunch of failures, and these aren't reflected completely in the bug count. So there's a number of things that are failing in test grid and have been for a while, and we haven't had issues open for them. So Mohammed is supposed to be opening some more issues there. We've been trying to pull in more sick folks specifically to look at some of the specific symptoms. Not a whole lot of traction there or change, but actually one thing landed yesterday. Most of the test cases happened to run in the US West zone on GCE, and it was actually getting to be oversubscribed for the setup that we have. And they moved some stuff over to a different zone, and suddenly quite a few of the tests are passing now. So it was just test pods weren't reliably starting up. So that's at least a good thing. We still have, I think, 7 or so issues that we need resolution on, and 3 or 4 of them maybe have line of sight on issues, but that is an improvement. Then the other thing specific to test infrastructure there, most of these things that are failing are GKE specific in as much as the test is failing there. But we've gone back and forth in the prior release about whether we drop these as blocking tests or how required we treat them. And they were green for so long at the beginning of this cycle that I feel like they do give us useful signal, and that they're breaking in ways that other things aren't breaking, again, tells me that they're at least informing us of changes that an operator is going to go through as they look at this new release, probably. So I feel like it's important signal. And then we'll probably end up doing the same as what we did in 1.11, looking at them case by case. If we still have failures and we can convince ourselves for the specific failure that the code in question, we know we have coverage elsewhere and it's working, then we probably won't block on the GKE failure. But we'll have to play that by ear as we go forward. What else in here? So I kind of mentioned docs, things falling away. We have had kind of an aspirational goal of getting PRs open for docs. And we were hoping to see a lot of them as placeholders to give us a sense of what work was coming. But Zach kind of admitted, even though like 37 are missing their PRs, that's kind of good in a way. We did get a good chunk of them to open things up and give us a heads up. And then the other thing that he mentioned was that this is kind of a leading indicator. So we have this big list of features that were proposed. If somebody's not willing to commit to writing their documentation, that's potentially an early sign that their code isn't on track to completion. So we already knew that our list of features was large, and some of them were kind of expecting to fall away because they're aggressive to reach this goal. But that gap in the docs may be a sign of that. So these will be ones that we want to start watching over the coming weeks. Are they rushing in right at code freeze? Are they low quality then as they do that? This is just something that we can use as a heads up. So that's a kind of a handy thing, I guess, to compare. Caitlin mentioned that the communications team is meeting with the features folks to start assessing that feature status and preparing for the blog post. Docs and communication, anything anybody wants to say there? And any questions so far too? I'm just kind of rambling. No? Okay. Something that I'm not sure if this was called out in the notes yesterday. Oh yeah, it is at the end. So I'll get to it still. Couple process changes. We've talked previously about the status approved for milestone. The lazy consensus date went by yesterday for that, and basically no objections, one question and maybe half dozen thumbs up on it. So we're going to go ahead and do that. And I've got a couple bits of work to just clean up some documentation and things around that, and the team on GitHub, the membership of it. But as we were talking about that yesterday, it came up, this is a good time for everybody on the team to look through the release team role handbooks. And that was one of the main things that I wanted to mention to you today. I'm putting a link in the minutes there. Glance through those for your role, and if there's anything that you notice that's maybe changed during this cycle relative to what you've observed, make a PR. Update the documentation or start a conversation, and we can keep these docs up to date. And then also, since the set of folks today are shadows, this is a chance also to think about talking to your release lead. If you're interested in taking on the lead role, it's a possibility. Part of the reason we have shadows is to provide coverage as things come up, but also to have some succession and turnover over time. Leads aren't obligated to give up their role every quarter to somebody new, but if you're interested in taking on a role as a lead or another shadow in the release team role, know somebody who is, we're kind of getting into the phase where a little bit of time should be spent on thinking about that succession, and there's opportunities if you all want to do more. And then I want to give a shout out to Yang Lee and ask if he has anything he wants to say today. So our branch manager has been on vacation since Thursday, and the two shadows, Hannes Horl and Yang Lee, have actually been doing the job and doing some of the branch management and doing it successfully. So huge kudos. That's awesome. Yang, do you want to say anything?
For now, everything seems pretty fine.
Okay.
And I hope we can go through this week as normal.
Yeah, so far everything looks good. And I really want to thank you because one of our questions has been how, and this is like across the Kubernetes community, how can we do more to get involvement from folks in China? And we know that there are certain issues, like the usage of certain Google tools, make it harder for people. And it's been really awesome to see you engage and you also be able to successfully run some of these things. So that experimentation is really helpful to us. And any suggestions you have also, whether here specifically in the release team or if you wanted to chat with people about things in contributor experience. And then also, are you going to be at KubeCon China?
Yeah, I will present there and for contributors in China,
Okay.
uh, and I want to say something about that, because the network issue is not the only thing to block folks out of contribution or something like that. But also, like I said at our discuss forum, I think not everyone here has that access, so I'll just read it. So the business model related to open source is not major in China. So many companies' participation in open source projects is limited by their profit pressure.
Mhm.
So their employees are not encouraged to participate in open source projects during their working hours.
Mhm.
So I think this is a issue for their contribution too. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm curious to see how that evolves. I've seen similar here and in other locations. To some extent, it's sort of a pendulum that goes back and forth. There's big interest in open source, and then maybe a little more focus at profit on times. And often, then companies that mature a little bit longer start to realize that their success they owe partly to this open source, and they do need to give back to ensure its vitality. So I'm curious to see if we see an evolution over time. But certainly, open source has been around, and plenty of other open source projects have engagement in China. But the business measurement in a newer industry like this cloud software, it could take some time. But so I'll be there at KubeCon, and I'm really excited to see the kind of to get a sense of the level of enthusiasm and the challenges. Like you say, are there a lot of people who want to contribute but are struggling to find the time? But then maybe there are things that some of us existing in the community can do to help them, whether it's advocating with from business to business or finding things that are even just some of the subtle things like having GitHub issues that are labeled as good first issue because they're a little bit more bite sized that somebody could, if they were trying to and they're not quite core work time, they could still squeeze in and make meaningful contribution and start to get engaged. So it'll be interesting to see how it evolves. Looking at the notes from yesterday, cherry picks. Oh, this is actually maybe a good transition. This cherry pick process. So part of branch management at the end, just before we release, is going to be cherry picking commits off of the master branch and into the release branch. And that cherry pick process is kind of clunky. So there's some work underway right now to do some little bits of tweaks to improve it. But Aaron yesterday mentioned that he's got kind of an umbrella issue on GitHub for some ideas. And this is an area where some help is needed. And potentially for you, as we're looking at branch management just over the month of September, if you see things there that you'd like to improve, I definitely encourage you to give it a try. And I've reached out to some of the, and suggested that Gwen also, who'd been involved in some of it, suggested that she reach out to some of the prior branch managers and patch managers for ideas. If we get a little bit more documented in the issues, maybe we can figure out some small tweaks that we could change to tools or processes, and then the documentation as well. Let's see. So I think that's everything that we talked about yesterday. Code Slush starts today, and so code. I don't know how much we've talked about this. If anybody has questions on the difference between Slush and Freeze, but Freeze, we're super rigorous about what comes into master, or we're supposed to. We're dependent on the community to enforce that rigor and not just label things for merge arbitrarily in GitHub. And Slush is sort of this week ahead of that, where we're slightly less rigorous, but we're more rigorous than during the normal development phase. We're sort of starting to tighten down and minimize what's coming into the master branch with the expectation that reduces risk, increases our CI signals reliability, and probably over the next week or even two, we get some major code that lands, and those always have the risk of destabilizing things. So having a good CI signal then is important. So we notice and understand a particular commit, a particular feature was the one that destabilized things. So CI signal is really going to be the focus for the next week or two, I would expect, for a number of us. And then docs, release notes, communications, all of that is ramping up as well then as that happens in parallel. Any questions, anything that you all want to talk about? That was kind of the set of stuff yesterday, and nothing much has changed since yesterday, aside from a small change in CI signal. Okay, then the final thing is a reminder, our meeting cadence is changing. So this week and next week, we go to meeting Monday, Wednesday, Friday for the core team. I'm keeping the Tuesday meeting as is, but have added a Wednesday, Friday. And then Monday coming is a US holiday, so I've canceled that meeting. And hopefully that's all reflected on your calendars, but for y'all coming on Tuesday, it won't matter too much. And I would encourage you, if you can, and if you also, I guess I would say, if the Wednesday, Friday times are particularly bad and you would like to attend, let me know, and I'd be willing to see about swizzling the time a little bit. But over the next month, I'd encourage you as Shadows to attend a few of those additional meetings, because the pace of things is going to ramp up a bit. The meetings will probably all be shorter, but we'll have a very targeted set of things to talk about and deal with, and they'll start to overlap, and we might need a little more coverage across the team, and more hands on the keyboard, more eyeballs looking at things is useful. All right, well, quiet morning, quiet evening. Okay, we'll call it early then. That works well for me because I've got some stuff I need to move on to this morning.
Worries.
All right. Have a good day. Have a good evening.
Bye, everyone.
See you tomorrow.
All right. Till then. Bye-bye.